Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hand Spinner Review Spot YouTube channel. You can click on the link in the description below to go to our Facebook page for all manner of reviews and features and hand spinner related photography. Today we're going to look at this. The Grimsmo Knives spinner. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting review, so let's kick off by having a quick look at some size comparisons. So, here it is next to a stubby, a Turnian from NTO Designs, a mini 6-shooter from Illuma Effects, a Trillium. So there you go, that gives you a pretty good idea of the size we've got here. We have some length, but overall it's a very small spinner and quite a pretty spinner to boot, as you can see. Very nicely designed. So let's get these out the way and take a closer look at what is Grimsmo Knives' first entry into the spinner market. So, if you're not a knife guy or a knife girl, who are the Grimsmo brothers? Well, they're knife makers, they're based out of Canada, and they have a really solid reputation. They've come out with 2 knife designs so far, the Norseman and the Rask, both really well oversubscribed, huge demand, massive back order lists, and a very, very long production schedule as well. Yeah, they're really a high quality manufacturer. They do almost everything on their knives via CNC. They're a very modern shop, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why when they saw that the hand spinner world was really blowing up, they decided that they would enter into that and they could probably have something to add and enter their first design. They did quite a good video on this on their YouTube channel, and I recommend you check out their YouTube channel if you're interested in, anything about machining or knife production or anything like that. It's really interesting. They show so much of their prototyping stages, their production. It's a really, really good channel. And they did do a video detailing the design and early prototyping of their spinner. So what actually is their spinner? It's 2 pieces of machined titanium around, obviously, a bearing. Before you think that this looks like something like the Trillium where the bearing is actually caged inside, that's not the case. This is a flanged bearing, which I'll show you in a second, that is literally just slotted into this. I'm not sure whether it's glued, it probably is. It could just be a tight press fit, but excuse me. It's a really nicely done overall fitting and it works very well, but it's not a caged kind of array like you would get from something like the Trillium. You then have some press fit weights at either end with the Grimsmo Norseman logo machined into them. Very nicely done. They're brass on either side, sandwiching around the titanium. And then this one has some brass buttons on it as well, with this nice kind of cross-hatched pattern. And then obviously you can see this very fine work. I'll bring it close. It's very fine work, very, very thin piece of machining here, and then these holes cut out in the center. The bearing itself is an interesting one. It's not one that I've ever come across in a hand spinner before, and I'm not even sure that it's been used in a hand spinner before. It's very small. It's an R156, I think I'm right in saying. It's a hybrid ceramic, and the idea behind using this, from watching the video that John Grimsmo put up, was that he wanted to try and reduce a certain amount of the wobble that he was getting from the bearings that he first tried using. It is, as I say, a very, very, very small bearing, and that throws the mass a long distance away from the bearing itself, which obviously ups your rotational momentum and makes this a remarkably long spinner. This, for being such a light piece of work, it's in the mid 30 grams. It will do, people have been getting nearly 10 minutes out of this, and that really is quite remarkable. I haven't got anywhere near that time myself. The longest spin time I've had out of this is 7 minutes, which is still really quite amazing considering just how small and just how light this is. So yeah, there you get a look at the bearing itself. You can see on the inside of these buttons you have the Grimsmo Knives 2017. Let's get in the center there. Engraved on the inside. It's all really strong examples. Oops, throwing buttons around. It's all really strong examples of their quality of machining. However, we do have some problems with this spinner, and I'm going to go into that here. I have had issues in the past with knife makers that have been jumping in on this. I think they make knives, they think that they're going to have no problem with hand spinners, you know, they're just simple. And I don't know whether that's the case here. I got the impression from the video that John did, and the fact that he seems like a really great guy, that that's probably not the case. But there are some tolerance issues here which bear a look at. Firstly, let's just have an overall look at the way that this works and the way that the design feels in hand. Okay, the buttons are nicely made, but they do lead to a slightly pinched grip and they are quite small. So if you're someone with big hands, you might not find this the most comfortable thing in the world. It fidgets really, really nicely, actually. Despite the fact that you do have a positive taper going out to these, there's quite a lot of negative space in here, and while that doesn't give you a lot of purchase for a forward flick unless you're using the reverse momentum to then catch it and flick it forward again, it still feels nice. Reverse flicks are quite comfortable once you get used to the overall shape and size. However, the decision to use this bearing because they wanted to lower the amount of wobble, any really heavily outer weighted bipole spinner like this will have that bearing lash sensation. It's just the nature of the design. However, I would say that in this particular design, it's probably more prevalent than most others that I've handled, and I've obviously handled a lot of spinners now. I don't think the decision to use this small bearing was really something which remedied that problem. Either that or the one they were using previously was even worse, which is quite remarkable because it's quite bad. That brings us on though to the fact that this does have some genuine problems. The first of which being that, as you can probably see, this is a flanged bearing, which means that there's a little flange on one side, which means that when you push the bearing into place, it will seat and stay in one position. It can't slide any further than the flange. And for whatever reason, the amount of movement in this bearing just means that the button is getting too close on one side, and you can actually hear that catching on the body as you move it around. Not ideal at all. And worse than that, if I sit it here, you can probably see that ends really early. Now if I flip it over, it's lovely and free spinning and exactly as it should be, which just means that when it's on that side, the body is being allowed to rub against the button. That's really not good. If I remove the buttons again, because this is one of the first things I did with this spinner because I quickly realised that the buttons were causing problems, you also have, it's not a tolerance issue, but the buttons are extremely tight within. This button obviously isn't because it's just the male side and it doesn't have a locator. But on this side, the female side where it slots in, these are very tight, and you end up having to use this button to push out the opposite side. What I did was I took a set of buttons from a Cloud Chasing Club mini spinner that I just happened to have around. These are in brass. I'm not even certain if you can order these separately, but there will be certain buttons that have the same interior diameter as an R188, but are a little bit slimmer, which allows you to use them with a spinner like this that's running this really diminutive little bearing. Now, the moment I switched it to these, I much prefer this spinner. It makes a huge difference to the quality of the feel, to how usable it is, and there are a number of reasons for that. One, they're a little bit further away from each other. You can see there's a gap in here which may or may not bother you. It means that you have less of a pinched grip, and it means that for this very small bodied spinner, you can handle it much more effectively. So overall, I would say that the button design is perhaps the biggest problem with this spinner. I don't find it the most ergonomic spinner in the world, and that's not because it's full of hotspots, because it absolutely isn't. It's just very small in the body, very slim. If you look at something even like this, which is the NTO Designs Tactical, this is a very slender, very small spinner. In fact, it's actually a really similar spinner in lots of ways, but it's just so much easier to use and get a purchase on the Grimsmo. Overall, I just don't love this spinner. I expected a lot from it, mainly because the Grimsmo brothers have such a fantastic reputation and a deserved reputation. I've handled their knives, they're exceptional. This just feels a little unfinished. As much as the finishing work itself is very good with this stonewashed titanium body and the nicely machine engraved weights at the end here, and how nicely done the actual cross-hatching work is on the buttons. There's loads and loads of beautiful stuff on show, but it just feels in hand like it's still a prototype, like there's still some work left to do here. Now, I'm sure that some that have gone out don't have this button issue, and I will contact the Grimsmo brothers and see what their thoughts are. But equally, this is the piece that shipped, and it isn't quite right, and it doesn't feel entirely finished to me. And I would love to see them do a complete redesign, to be honest, something a bit wider, something that's a little bit more ergonomic, a little bit more enjoyable to use, because this, as a first entry to the market for such a great company, just feels a little unfinished. So yeah, that is the Grimsmo Knives hand spinner in titanium and brass. Grab hold of one if you like the look of them and you don't think you'll have any issue with the size or shape, or if you're just a collector. But if you happen to get one that has the sorts of issues that I've experienced here, I'm not convinced you're going to be completely happy. Thank you very much, guys. Catch you at the next video. Bye bye.